My name is Sean Mason. I'm a sales engineer here at Bamboo Solutions, and I'll be your guide as we navigate through today's session. Now, the main goal of today's short webinar is to show you how to manage projects within SharePoint with minimal effort and configuration using our own SharePoint Project Management Central application. Now, as I talk through today's demonstration, you're going to hear me talk about various types of individuals, such as project managers, there's project team members, program managers, and also stakeholders. Now, based on their role, okay, within our solution, they're going to be able to do things and see things differently within the project management solution. And I'll point out some of those differences as we go through some of the different pages and screens within the solution as to, okay, how is this page going to be different based on, a team member versus a project manager. Now, the PM Central, the solution overall, how does this work? Well, the way we develop and the way we provide this to clients is based on different functional, out-of-the-box project workspace sites. So these are different site templates that are provided to you. And the site templates contain anywhere from 20 to 30 different individual tools, or web parts, if you will, that are collectively put together to work in a cohesion type of effect. So you can obviously aggregate and roll up information from your project level up to a top portfolio site, etc. Now, the main intent and purpose of these project sites and the portfolio sites is to let your project teams proactively track, organize, maintain, and also have the ability to report on your statuses, tasks, risks, issues, and milestones from one central place. Now, in addition to all of those other features, you also have the ability to effectively communicate and coordinate your schedules with your team members, executives, and also stakeholders. Now, the current releases that PM Central is available to work with for SharePoint is currently SharePoint 2007, SharePoint 2010, and SharePoint 2013 platforms. Now, throughout today's demonstration, you'll find that PM Central is a complete project management solution. It covers varying degrees some of the major disciplines of project management. And that's going to include a long array of different management styles. So we'll talk about task management, there's scope and schedule management, resource and cost management, there's risks, communication, issues management, document and change management will be covered today. We'll also talk about dashboarding for project portfolio management and light reporting. Now, much of the coverage of these areas is directly tied to the fact that the product runs on SharePoint and extends SharePoint's capabilities to provide a more complete solution. Now, the latest release we'll be going through is version 4.3. It's the same edition that you can go out to our website and download as a free trial. Here's some of the new features we've added with this particular edition. The biggest one is we've added a new alert. Now, there's 5 alerts that we've added to the system that have been with the product since the inception, but we've added a new 6th alert, and it revolves around various reports and reporting notifications. And we'll talk about that in a little bit more detail once we get to the report section. We've also added a new portfolio tab. Okay, so at the top level where your high-level managers and department managers or execs would be reviewing some of the content of your projects, let's say, the portfolio tab is going to contain several different dashboards in the overall progression of not only projects but tasks and also milestones. We've added the ability to import Excel project plans. Now, we've had the ability to import from Microsoft Project for a number of years. There's an add-on that is bundled with the tool. So we've added here recently also the ability to import project plans that certain clients have developed within Excel. All right, so before we jump right into the actual product, I want to go over this particular slide. I think it does a great job of sort of defining how the solution from PM Central, from an architectural standpoint, is set up within SharePoint. So we know the different tier structures and how it works from a portfolio site to a project site and also a department site level. How do they all work together before we start seeing pages and different sites within SharePoint. So before we get too far ahead of ourselves, I want to talk about this particular slide. Now, as you can see, there's 3 different tiers that have been set up. We've got the portfolio site here on the top left. We've got a department site over here on the right, and then at the bottom, sampling of a couple different projects. Now, these are different site templates. These 3 sort of structures are different site templates that we, Bamboo, is going to provide to a client or an evaluation perspective that they can evaluate the solution. Now, these site templates are going to contain different web parts, different purposes to do things with items. These are line items from tasks, issues, and risks, or are we going to consolidate and aggregate that up to a top level? Now, the portfolio site, let me give you a brief description of what that's intended to do. This particular site is going to show you the aggregated data of all your project subsites. It's going to contain multiple dashboards that report on your tasks, issues, risks, and schedules. Now, the bottom of the screen, the different project sites, these are going to be a sub-site of the portfolio site, and it's designed to have its data rolled up to the portfolio site so you can get a comprehensive status of all the projects from within your portfolio. Now, over here on the right, this is a department site. Now, the word department can be a little misleading. Think of it as a mini portfolio site. Okay, so it still has the same capability to aggregate and consolidate information from your projects. Where it differs is the program manager or an administrator, whoever might be controlling the solution, will have the ability to filter which projects ultimately roll up to this mini portfolio site. And it's just defined as a department site. Now, you can use department as a filter, location as a group criteria. You could use manager, you could use location, territory. There's a whole list of different fields that you can define from a filter standpoint on the different granular capture points that are being used at the project level and how that's going to trickle up to this department site. Okay. Now, where this is kind of unique is not only giving you the ability to filter and roll up the different projects, is it's going to generate a new web address, a new URL. So let's say you have individuals that are outside the organization, or maybe even folks inside the organization, different departments, that you want to give them access to the project management solution, but we don't want to give them access to the whole entire environment. We only want to give them access to certain projects that they need to be, simply just either aware of, or maybe they're part of tasks, let's say. Well, you can set that up so that they can only be aware that this department site is a specific URL. They can see those project sites that they may be working on, but they're unaware of the fact that the entire enterprise from the portfolio may contain 30, 50, 100 different projects that might be tracking from company XYZ. So it just allows you different granularity of security points so that if you have individuals that still need to access PM Central, you're not giving them access to other secure projects that might be tracked within the solution. Now, the portfolio sites and the department sites, they still give you the ability to run resource allocation and capacity planning. All of the canned reports would be there, alert notifications, so you're not losing anything between the two. Okay, so with that being said, we've got that general review of the solution, how it just works from an illustration standpoint. Let's go ahead and jump right into the actual product, and we'll talk about some of the features that it can contain. All right, so we're going to be primarily going through today in a SharePoint 2010 environment, but like I had mentioned earlier, it is available for SharePoint 2007 and also 2013. Now, we've landed on the portfolio site. This is the main top tier that your project managers and high-level execs would typically access. Most likely, your team members, may not access this page. You may not want to give them access to this particular page, but here again, that gives them access to all of the different projects and items and reports that they can potentially run. So that's really up to the organization how you want to set that up. Now, from this page, the administrator has several different options that they can do. So clearly, they have the ability to create a new project right there on the screen. They can do that from central actions. There's several options in these drop-downs that the administrator can run. So there's add new project, requesting project sites, and that works off sort of an alert notification for request approval. We also have the control panel, which will control a lot of the general settings with the tool. So before you go in and start adding projects, you might want to add resources underneath the resource center. There's the resource management section. And the only reason I mentioned you might want to add resources before you're adding projects, because when you get to the stage of filling out the project data to create the project to start off, well, who's going to be the project manager? Well, you haven't created any resources, so we need to first pull in some resources from your SharePoint user information list or Active Directory so that those resources can be assigned. Alert notifications, Here again, under the general settings, we mentioned those early on within the PowerPoint slide presentation. There's 5 that are ready to go, and then with this new 6th one is basically a report alert. If you want to go ahead and create new alerts, you want to be notified about other reminders, items that so many before days are due, a heads up notice that you want to receive from Outlook or a mail client, you can set those up. And then obviously the reports. Now we're going to go into those 3 areas I'm touching on just very briefly in a lot more detail. But I just wanted to show you just a brief sort of quick snippet of some of the control panel sections that you'll be able to manage and some of the things you might want to think through before you actually start creating various projects within the solution. Now getting back to the PM Central, the main portfolio site, the way this particular page is laid out and it's provided to the project managers is there's several tabs of navigation here at the top. Now these tabs of navigation, since we're at the top level, if we were to drill into each of these, what is it going to do? Well, it's going to show us the aggregated data of each of the projects that we're tracking. And below the page here at the bottom, we can see I have 5 different projects, and they simply are named as different colors to keep the projects simplistic as we go through these demonstrations. Now, before we talk a little bit further, we can see underneath the department sites, we've got 2 called Crayon and Sharpie. Now remember, I mentioned them as mini portfolio sites. So if I were to click on one of them, let's say we're working with Crayola. This is one of our many department sites that I've set up. Let's see if I can pull this and overlay this on the screen. In the background here, we can see we've got the 5 projects within portfolio site. Over here on the front side of the facing screen, we can see that we're only viewing 3 of those projects. We still have access to the same tabs that we're seeing at the background, which will allow us to consolidate the information from our tasks, risks, issues, run reports, create alerts, etc. So this URL, you'll notice, is completely different than the one that's above. So this is the one I mentioned earlier within that PowerPoint slide that you may want to give out to other organizations in regards to if you have folks that are part of different projects that may not be within the organization, maybe they're contractors, things of that nature, you can go ahead and provide that URL out. They'll only be able to work with these projects that are within this particular department site, and they won't be able to see the other delta of the projects that you have within your portfolio. Okay, so with that being said, let's drill into some of the more finite details within the solution. So I'm going to drill right into the project that we'll be working with today. We're going to utilize Project Red. Really no different than any of the others. The only major difference is I'm the project manager of this one with my user ID. So we'll be able to see things a little bit differently opposed to if I were logging in as a team member. Now this is the project site that your team members and project managers would land on. Now as I talk about each of these tabs here and we drill into each of the content, you can see that there's a lot of these pages that are going to be filled out with several different web parts and features. Now, if you're not going to use all of those features, you have the ability to go in and remove them from pages. Let's say you find something that's helpful on one of the tabs or one of the pages, and you want to move it to a different tab or a different page. You definitely have the ability to do that. The solution is very flexible in allowing you to move things around, edit them, the web parts that are being provided to you. The nice thing I like to explain during these webinars is that every organization is going to track project management a little bit differently, and the goal for those organizations is typically to find a solution that meets as close to 100% of how they construct things from a project management perspective. And it's hard to do that. There's a lot of different products on the market that they offer a lot of great features, but finding one that does 100% of everything is kind of hard to meet. So our product will differ slightly from that in regards to you have the ability to change things around. So as we go through a lot of the content, let's say we're about 20 minutes in from where we are right now, and you're starting to see some of the different material we've covered, and you're thinking, this is great, this gives me a good starting point, but we go into a little bit more depth. We're tracking, agendas, meeting minutes, summaries, more content. Are we able to track additional bits of information within each of the projects? In some projects, we might not track that much. Are we able to differentiate between, projects that it might be more in depth versus one that we don't need all of these features? Can we change those around? And you absolutely can. Some of these tabs here at the top that we're visually looking at, you have the option to remove those. So as we talk about just some of the ones that are provided out of the box from the template, if you feel it's not going to be needed, then you can simply remove that tab. Now, on the flip side of that is if you are looking for additional tabs, additional pages, and lists and libraries that you want to track that we don't simply provide from a template perspective, you can go in and add those in. Now, working off of that, let's say, okay, you've done that, you've created a new project, you've put some time forth to customize the project a little bit. You don't want to reinvent the wheel every time you create new projects. You know, can you use this project that you've worked with as a template? Can you create that template and then use it moving forward? And you absolutely can. Here again, after you modified and changed the project, you can save it as a template, put it into the gallery of future project templates, just along with the ones that we have out of the box. And then when you create a new project, you can utilize some of the same existing content that you've created earlier. So documentation, resources, maybe there's certain issues and risks or tasks that are always going to stick with projects when they're created. You know, you can define those at the inception point of the project. Okay, so now that that's out of the way, let's take a little bit deeper dive into what the project is going to contain. So we've landed on the Project Home tab. As you can see, there's project objectives, announcements, tasks due this week. As you can see, with the user ID, S. Mason, that's assigned to me. That's who I'm logged in currently. Now, if I were logged in as a team member, I'd still see these, but we'd see the other team member's name here associated. Below that, we have a calendar that you guys can set up a number of different ways. And honestly, if we just strip the calendar component out and talked about it by itself, we could spend a good 25 minutes on all of the different features that it can contain. Now, first and foremost, I've modified this one just a little bit, but it's not any significant, you know, there's no been coding done or anything of that nature. All I've done is I've added the issues, risks, and tasks. Those are the other three lists that we're tracking from a template perspective onto this calendar. And I did that because, you know, I was thinking if I'm a project manager, I'd like to be able to see the different tasks, issues, and risks when they are populated from a graphical monthly basis. So from a calendar standpoint, I want to be able to aware of the fact that what's coming up at the end of the month or next month. You know, I have the ability to flip back and forth between future months. I can change the views from day, week, month, quarter, and year. There's endless color coding options. And you also have the ability to filter based on the lists and libraries that you add to the calendar. So if I wanted to just clean this up a little bit and I want to see just the tasks that I'm responsible for in this particular month, I can select that basic view, and then that'll clean the calendar up, and it'll show just the tasks that are assigned to me. Now that's going to work off the user ID that's currently logged in. So if I were to log off, I log in as Mary or Bob, some other team member, those two particular tasks would not show up. Okay, we'd probably see a few other tasks at other times of this month for other team members that might be associated with certain tasks. Moving on, documentation that you'd like to frequently access for the team members can be dropped here. You have the ability to send an email to the project team, and the team members would have the ability to access this feature as well. It simply allows the users to, you know, streamline their efforts. They don't need to leave PM Central or specifically SharePoint, go out into you know, Outlook and conduct their mail message and flip back and forth, determining who are all the different team members that are associated with the project. It pre-populates that there in the to box. They can quickly send off the message and send this off to the entire team. All right, back to the top of the page, we can see we've got a department site. So that clearly just lets us know that the project red is a member of the Crayola department site, which is basically that mini portfolio site we saw earlier. It just gives us a heads up that this is this project is a member or reverts back up to that particular department site. Now we've got our project info and my project. So what are these two sort of quick dashboards with these KPIs showing us? Well, they're showing us the different key performance indicators, letting us know what's going on or how the progression of the project is moving along through the life cycle. Now the KPIs, they are set up at a very low-lying threshold. Okay, so you have the ability to go in and change the metrics that are being defined out of the box from our template. Now we did set them up with a very low-lying threshold because we had to set them up with something, some numeric system to trigger the green, yellow, and red indicators. Otherwise, you would just get, box with X's across the screen. It wouldn't look really too great. So let me tell you how we're using it out of the box. If there are 0 items in the list, that's going to trigger a green indicator. If there are 1 to 4 items in the list, that triggers a yellow indicator, and 5 or more items in the list triggers a red indicator. Okay, so like I said, you can change those metrics around based on the color codes you see fit. Now, with that being said, what are these actual lists looking at? The issues, the risks, and schedules. What is it actually being pulled from? Well, the issue status is looking at our overdue issues for the project. If I click on the KPI itself, it'll take me right over to those overdue issues items. In this case, it's 1 to 4. So we see that there's, for that yellow indicator, so we see there's 4 items in that particular list triggering that type of yellow indicator. Okay. The next two, the risk status, simply shows us the overdue risks. The scheduled status shows us the overdue tasks. And then the budget work, well, this is a little bit different. This is going to compare your budgeted versus actual work for the project. Okay, so the My Projects, this last component here on the page. Remember earlier on when I mentioned that there's going to be a few things on the page that would be different based on the user ID, like whether you're a project manager, team member, stakeholder, etc. Well, since I'm the project manager of Project Red and also Project Orange. So I'll be able to see this My Projects tab. Now let's say I were to log in as Mary, Bob, some of these other team members down here on the page, and I log into Project Red. I see the same page details, nothing is different. The biggest thing is this My Projects tab would be removed from the page. They are not a project manager of Project Red or Orange. So the project team would shift up the page and eliminate this particular dialog window. Okay? So there's going to be a few things based like in a similar comparison or similar pattern, I should say, where based on the user ID, the screen is going to be laid out differently. The majority of this is going to be found on the summary tab here, which we get to in maybe about 5 minutes. All right, let's jump over to take a look at some of the other details that the team members and project managers can track. We'll take a look at the Overview tab. Now, we first start off with the project milestones. Now, this is simply a filtered view of all the milestones from the tasks list, which we'll get to here momentarily. Beyond that, we have a project timeline Gantt, and this allows anyone who'd like to see the progression of the project from start to finish, also where we are in regards to the overall progression, where's the midpoint. We can also see where the milestones land throughout the course of the project's duration. The project status report, you can think of this as a weekly status update for the project manager to come in here and create some notes for the team's review. We've got our task status report. Now this is a little rather unique because we have, a task status report and then we have a tasks tab. So what's the difference here? Well, some environments that we work with, the clients don't want to give the team members access to the tasks tab. This is where the schedule is actually located. Obviously, the team members don't need to be going in, changing constraint types, predecessor and parent dependencies, duration, and work. We simply want them to update, if you will, the % complete and maybe the status, maybe give us an update, something very minimal in regards to the amount of content that they change. And the task status report allows them to do that. So let's go in to edit one of these items and see some of the information that the team member would technically be updating. Now within each of the tasks, you have about 30 different fields that you can work from, and this is just a subset of those 30 fields in the schedule that the project manager would normally work with. But we've trimmed this down for the team member because, like I said, they only need to be working with probably status, % complete, and then maybe give us a quick update as to how the task is moving along. So there's a couple different ways that you guys can use this. You can add more fields, you can remove fields. If you're really not too concerned about the security process and you want to give them access to the schedule, that's perfectly fine. It's just that's how this particular tab was set up within the Overview tab for the project. Beyond that, we have at the bottom of the page the ability for the team members to submit a change request. Now, the way the change request works, and then very similarly when you put in a new project request, there is an alert notification that gets sent out to notify an individual saying, hey, there's been a change request or a project request submitted. I need you to come back into the solution and approve or reject the item. Well, if you're looking to further enhance that capability from like a workflow perspective, we do have an add-on called Workflow Conductor that can be bundled within the solution, and that would allow you to enhance, elaborate the process that's being used behind the scenes. Now, we do actually have these templates from a workflow perspective ready to go, so all you have to do is open up that particular workflow and then change if you need to have it sent to multiple people, maybe it needs to go through a nested tier approval process. It really is up to you, but I just wanted to put that out there on how that works. The lessons learned, this is a capture point to simply discuss what worked well with the project, what are some of the challenges, any hurdles that may have been encountered during the project's progression. Now, the lessons learned will also aggregate or roll up to the top portfolio site so that other project managers can review lessons learned. The reason for this is if a project manager encounters a particular hurdle with a project and they're trying to research on how they can get around it, they may want to check the lessons learned. There might be some other projects that have encountered a similar process in past experience, and it'll document how those particular project managers in that project overcame that particular issue. So it's a great feature to sort of, if you will, document some of the challenges or improvements that's been done to the projects and then use those with other future projects that may come about. All right, the task summary. First chart we've encountered within today's demonstration. Let me tell you about all the chart features before we go into detail on this one. Now, first and foremost, we have about 10 different styles of charts. So from a bar chart, pie chart, line chart, bubble chart, etc. There's a long list of different styles that you can use. If you want to change the colors, there's an endless array of different colors that you can work with. The key code legend down here, you can change the text if you want to move this to the left, the right, the top. The percentages that go around the bar chart or the pie chart or line chart that you are plotted, you can change those in regards to the description. And then as you can see, if you hover over the chart itself, it'll take you directly out to the data source that's being used specifically for that particular chart. And lastly, if you don't want to see this chart at the bottom of the page, maybe you want to move it to the top of the page. Maybe you want to create a whole new page that all it is just charts, and you want to move it over there. You have the ability to do that. So here again, quite a bit of flexibility with the charts within the solution. Now, what does this chart actually look at? Well, it's looking at the tasks by status from our task list, in addition showing us the number of percentage of tasks for each status. All right, moving along, let's take a look at the Summary tab. Now, the Summary tab is extremely indicative of who you're logged in as. It's basically going to display what you're responsible for in the project. Now, with my user ID, the widget here at the top will let me know that I have 13 tasks for this project, 2 active issues, and 4 active risks. If I were to log off, I log in as those other team members, such as Mary, Bob, Jim, etc., these numbers would change. Okay, the metrics here at the top would be significantly different based on that user ID's responsibility for the project. Now, below this widget at the top, you'll see that there are several sub-tabs, and the sub-tabs just drill into the line item or the granular details that are being used for the metrics above in this particular widget. So we have 2 active issues. If I were to select the My Active Issues tab, well, there we go. We can see those 2 items. If I need to edit and work with them from this page, I can definitely open that. Let me edit this real quick. There we go. That'll open up the form for the issues, and then I can come in here and say, okay, this is complete, this is done. I don't need to track this as a particular issue anymore. Or maybe I need to assign it to someone else. Obviously, different variables can come up, different changes can be made. Now, one other point I would like to make before we move on to the schedule underneath the tasks is we have a time tracking solution that can integrate with PM Central in addition to the workflow component. Now, the biggest thing that you'll find within the time tracking solution is it has the ability to pull in the resources and tasks assignments for each project from a timesheet perspective. So if you are looking for a timesheet solution that is going to pull in the different project-related data from a timesheet so that you can allocate and run reports for how many hours that somebody spent on a specific task in a specific pay period, you can do that. Now, real quick, you can see there's Project Blue and Red. I've got 2 different projects with different tasks assigned to me for this particular pay period. And I also have my regular daily duties that I'm required as a business employee. So, several different options here. Obviously, we're not going to go into too much detail. It's not the purpose of today's demonstration, but I just want to point that out because the 2 do closely intertwine with the project management process. All right, let's go ahead and move back to the Project Red, and we'll talk about the schedule. All right, so we've transitioned over to the Tasks tab. The Gantt chart is going to load for us. There we go. Okay. Now, as I mentioned within the PowerPoint slide, you do have the ability to import from Microsoft Project. There's an add-in that's built in, and also from Microsoft Excel. So if you currently have data in existence in those other products and you'd like to pull them in, you have the ability to use the import tools to bring that in. Now, if you're looking from a forward perspective and you want to continue to use Microsoft Project, we get a lot of questions sometimes, is there a way to sync or append the information from PM Central back into Microsoft Project? And you do have that ability. There's also a sync process of that tool that is bundled in that would allow you to pull the information, the updated information from the tasks back into Microsoft Project. Now, with this particular Gantt view, you have some different options here. You can do some inline editing, so you can bounce around. You don't have to open up the item itself. The Gantt chart, the graphical perspective, several different options here. Different color options can be utilized. The arrows are going to indicate parent and predecessor task dependencies. If you want to change the filter to just showing my tasks as opposed to the entire tasks, we can do that. Here again, that's drilling or being pulled off of the user ID that's currently logged into the system. So if you have a different user ID that you're logged in with, well, those tasks are going to be different when you select this particular view. All right, let's go ahead and edit one of the items that's due this week. Let's see, task 509 is a good one to start with. All right, so when we look at some of these fields, the majority of them are going to be somewhat self-explanatory. So I'm going to hit some of the more popular ones that we needed to discuss. So resource, okay. Currently you can see it's assigned to me. Well, I do have the ability to assign this to more than one resource. Let's say I wanted to include Anna and David within this process for the task. I'll update the resource assignments, update the assignment units, and then now we have the ability to assign from a percentage standpoint, how much assignment these particular resources are going to work with this particular task. Moving on, you have your duration work, the parent and predecessor fields. 4 different constraint types are available. Whether the item is going to be captured as a milestone as opposed to a regular task. Your work breakdown structure, and then we have various remaining cost fields that are going to go hand in hand with resource allocation and capacity planning, budgeting, and also the canned reports within the tool. Okay, before we move out of the Tasks tab, I do want to speak real briefly about the baselines. Now, within each project, you do have the ability to manage baselines. We have 3 different capture points. We have the project schedule baseline here at the top, and what this particular baseline capture is going to do is compare the changes to the current schedule to the baseline. Beyond that, we have the project cost baseline. Now, this particular baseline is going to compare changes to the current cost to the baseline. And then our final baseline capture point is called the scheduled tasks baseline. I'll scroll down further below to see some of those. There we go. Now, this one is going to specifically compare changes to the current cost to the baseline. So, the main intent and purpose of the baselines underneath the Tasks tab is to determine if the project is going to merit cost, scope, and scheduling changes if the current activities deviates drastically from one of your initial baselines. Now, as you hover over each of the baselines, they'll provide a text tooltip of when the baseline was captured and some of the details that revolved around it. Now, you can set up a maximum of up to 10 baselines at any given time. You can change the color codes for those baselines as well. All right, let's move on, take a look at the issues and risks. All right, we start off with the active issues for the project. Now, if you'd like to change the view and rather see all of the issues rather than just the active ones, you can simply edit the web part here and make that filter change. Now, beyond that, we have a simple graph chart on a pie chart, specifically letting us know how many are active, closed, and deferred issues are associated with this particular project. The risks, very similar layout where we have the risk items at the top of the page. Okay, these are the active risks that we're looking at here, and then beyond that we have a bubble chart. Now this bubble chart is defined as a risk chart, and the way this works, or the way that this is defined, is the measured exposure is based on each risk exposure and the cost exposure that goes along with it. So let me go through a quick use case scenario so we can understand how this the risk chart works. All right, so let's say I were to key in a new risk, and during the creation of that risk form, I said that it had a pretty low impact, maybe 3 or 4, and the probability percent, maybe it was pretty high, 80, 90%. So it's going to lay it out here in this quadrant of the chart. And in doing so, you can see it still falls on the green boxes. So in that particular case, you know, it'd have to have a really large cost expenditure for the size of the bubble to really extend out in a large capacity. In that case, you know, here again, with the risk being up here in the green area, that particular item is going to be of a nature of a low risk. It's not something that's going to impede the project's process. It's not really going to create a hurdle. Yeah, you're probably going to want to monitor it, but it's definitely not going to push the deadline of the project out to some future month or future date. So let's reverse that scenario a little bit. Let's take a new risk, the impact pretty high, 10 or 11. Okay, probability percent maybe not as high. Let's say it's you know, 30 to 40%. Well, regardless, it's falling in the red quadrant of the chart. And here again, regardless of the cost expenditure, it's going to, you know, fall in the red area of the chart again. So with that being said, that particular risk, much like the ones you see here and here, those are going to be ones you want to monitor because they're definitely going to impede the progression of the project and create a significant deadline. Now we're going to see a similar chart like this at the top level portfolio site, and as you can see with Project Red, I've got some major risks I need to address. So we'll see that other risk chart from a consolidated basis across our other projects, and how this one is skewed a little bit because we've got some higher risks opposed to the other projects. All right, let's move along to the documentation tab within each of the projects that you'll be able to use. Now, what we've done here is we've utilized a lot of the out-of-the-box features for this particular page for our document management tab. The reason being is, you know, let's face it, SharePoint document libraries have a lot of great features. There's check-in, check-out, integrated workflow capabilities, alerts, granular permissions, you know, the list goes on. I mean, that's one of SharePoint's powerful suits is its document library features and capabilities. So we took those features, implemented into our own document management tab. However, we implemented one of our own tools from a display perspective over top of the document library. Now, this particular view you're looking at, you normally are not going to receive from the out-of-the-box SharePoint document libraries. Once you start creating folder structures, you don't get this familiar style navigation tree. You know, if we were to browse our own folder structures, we're able to go up and down between without losing where we are from a parent perspective. But in document libraries, we lose that functionality. So like I said, we've implemented one of our own display views on top of this, so it's easily to define and navigate through your nested folder library structures. And let's say we're going to work with this last document. There are all those great features that you get from a document library from the out-of-the-box SharePoint tools. All right, the last tab we'll talk about within the project is called the discussion thread. Now, we get a lot of questions here in regards before we sometimes even get to talk about discussion thread, and that is, you know, why did you guys feel that it would be important to put that in to the project? Well, we felt it would be a good idea to implement this into every project. The reason being is that I think we all can agree that knowledge sharing is going to be paramount to achieve a successful project completion. And this is an excellent way to hold these discussions, where you can you can manage content approval, there's versioning, workflows if necessary, and then best of all, there's alert notifications. So just an excellent way to document some of or discuss some of the different features and aspects of your project. Now, I will add before we go on to some other features about the solution, Bamboo uses PM Central internally for its own products. Our portfolio consists of over 60 products, and the way we use PM Central is each product is a project, okay? So every product that we have is actually a project within PM Central. And this allows us to track from a discussions point and issues, risks, tasks, all of the different feature enhancements, all of the different, let's say if bugs were to come up with the tool, we can discuss those. Our support team and engineering team heavily uses the discussions tab within every single project. They're able to discuss certain issues, obviously test things out, run through scenarios before they're actually logged as an issue and risk for that particular product. Okay, so I just wanted to point that out, that there are some definite real case scenarios that not only the organization that's hosting the solution or providing the solution is using, but we also see a lot of our client base using this as well. Okay, so now that we've individually looked at and reviewed a project site, we can definitely see the need for now aggregating our project data and then presenting that at a top level for easy viewing. And that's exactly what the PM Central portfolio site provides us. Now, here again, we've navigated back up to the top level site. I'm going to drill into the overview tab from our top level to see how the consolidated information is now going to start to pull together. Now, the overview tab starts us off with, or it provides managers, I should say, a high-level view of all the projects from within the portfolio. Now, the managers here have the ability to filter by week, month, quarter, and year. They can flip back and forth to see, future and past years in regards to the activity status if need be. Now, beyond that, we have a weekly project status report. Now, we saw this earlier in Project Red, but it was labeled Project Status Report. So we can see there, those are the different items from each of the projects from a weekly standpoint, okay, what the project managers have provided for the team's review. The change request, same thing, the same consolidation effect is coming into play. We had an earlier change request in Project Red. We can now see some of the other change requests that have been submitted from Project Brown, Orange, and also Yellow. Now, if you are utilizing stakeholders within your project management environment, this is going to be a key area where they're going to be able to navigate the project site creation request. They can put in requests for new project sites, and then depending on who the approver is going to be, those projects can be approved that have been submitted by the stakeholder. Now, once again, it works off of an email approval process. Now, if you want to interject and put in your own or put in our own workflow conductor tool as an add-on, here again, you have the ability to do that because it's part of our request process. All right, let's move along and take a look at the Summary tab. Now, the Summary tab should look very familiar to us. It's the same as we previously looked at the project site. But the biggest difference is that now if we look closely at some of the metrics, some of the items such as tasks, issues, and risks, well, those have increased. Earlier we only had 13 tasks assigned to me and 2 active issues. Now we have 21 tasks and 5 active issues. And we can see that as if we scroll down a little bit further underneath the Tasks tab, that it's also filtered for us. So it's grouped by each of the projects. There's blue, brown, orange, and red that we're visually looking at from this particular screen. Now, if I were to log off, I log in as a different user ID. When they hit this page, they're going to see the same thing. All of these tasks and issues and risks assignments that they would be assigned across the entire portfolio. All right, let's drill into the Risks tab. Okay. You definitely see the aggregation effect on this particular page where we have the risks consolidated and grouped by each of the projects, where we have project blue, orange, red, and then finally yellow. And there's that additional risk chart that we saw earlier, but it's a little bit different. Now, much like earlier when we talked about the risk chart and the measured exposure, well, the measured exposure in this area at the top level is based on the sum of all risk exposure per project and by the sum of all cost exposure per project. So you can quickly see what risk level for each project is on the chart. Now, identifying project red is much higher, okay, than some of the other projects that are going to be more of a low-lying threshold. So project red is one we need to take a closer look at simply because of those other high-risk values that we saw from an individual standpoint back at the project. All right, moving along, let's take a look at the Schedules tab. All right, now the Schedules tab starts us off with a portfolio timeline Gantt. Now the project we were in earlier, we did see the timeline Gantt, but it was just for that singular project. This will allow us to see from all of the projects the progression of the projects from a timeline perspective. We also can plot, different milestones. You have some filter controls based on different types, different departments, and even the priority of the project as well. Now, beyond the timeline Gantt, we're getting a data viewer style layout in regards to all of the tasks across the entire portfolio. Now, this is grouped by each project. There's project blue. If I scroll down, we'll see brown and orange. Now, there's some other nice features with this view that's different from the, let's say, datasheet view within SharePoint. We can drag and drop any of the column headings up to the header bar. Okay, so let's say if we want to take status and then maybe priority. So now we have the ability to group by, project, status, and priority and see the data in that type of nature. Let's also take it a step further and say, well, I only want to see items from a status nature that are of a completed status. So we'll go ahead and type that in, choose contains. The data sheet will think a minute, and we should have about 6 items, I want to say, that are coming up from each of the different projects. So we have 6 completed items across our portfolio, and there we can see here again the filter controls that are being used. So a lot of nice features that you can use and filter on the fly without having to go into SharePoint, create some additional views, and then coming back and forth. So you're not wasting additional time working with the data. You can simply filter on the fly. And like I said earlier, you're not wasting a lot of time doing it. All right, let's move along to the Issues tab. And we start off with a graphical chart for the issue summary. Now, this starts off with a bar chart, but if you'd rather see a line chart or a pie chart, you can change these on the fly from the portfolio site. In addition, we have all the active issues. Very much like we saw some of the features within the tasks, those features can be done identically to the active issues. It just lists out all of the active issues and it's grouped by project. So if we want to take it a step further, take priority, much like the same process I did just a few minutes ago, we have the ability to group and filter on the fly. Portfolio summary. This is that new tab I mentioned that we added within this latest release. It's a new dashboard allowing us to see the portfolio summary chart. Gives us a status standpoint of all the projects from an active, pending, canceled, and also completed. Now, my projects right now are none are in a completed status. So we're seeing the majority of mine are active, pending, excuse me. I have one that's in pending and then one that's canceled. Beyond that, 2 additional charts. These are the consolidation of the various tasks across the portfolio and the various milestones. Now, once again, if you want to change the display format and colors, all those other features about the charts, you have the ability to make those changes. All right, so now that we've gone through a good detailed review of the project and the portfolio site, let me switch gears a little bit and talk about some of those other features we would find within the control panel. I'm going to first talk about the resources. Now, I mentioned earlier on, the first thing you probably want to do is add resources so that they can be assigned as either a project manager or team member to projects. And the way you do that is individually adding them either one at a time by clicking on the new button. There's a form that would come up. And while all this does work, there's nothing wrong with it. It's a little time consuming. So a faster way is to use the user profile import. and that'll pull users from the SharePoint user information list or Active Directory. The resource assignments, what this tab here is going to display for us, is what we call the Resource Center. Now, the Resource Center is going to define, there we go, is going to define all of the resources and the tasks they've been assigned across the entire portfolio. And then on the right-hand side of the page, we get a Gantt chart that will plot where those task assignments are located, okay, for the resources. Now, I do have the ability to change views by assignments, project date, even by enterprise resource pool, or excuse me, even by resources. All right, the next tab we'll take a look at is the resource allocation and capacity planning. Now, before we talk a little bit further about this, the resource assignments, the resource allocation, capacity planning, these two tabs in this area in general is also available at each of the projects level. I tend not to go through it from a webinar perspective, simply as it gets, it's a little redundant in regards to the material. The biggest difference that you will find from that project level and the portfolio site is, well, here again, the aggregation effect. You know, if we look at the individual assignment allocations for just the project, that's all we're going to find. But if we run that at the portfolio site, well, we're going to see multiple projects and how those resources come into play. So here again, I just want to mention those features exist, but I typically just show it from the portfolio site so you get an idea of what it would look like. Now, the reports here that are defined, we have a couple different options. You can change the year by simply a drop-down. You can save the report to a list for future reference. The Actions button would allow you to export them to Excel or even send this off to your printer. Now, the first of three reports we'll look at this particular section is called the All Assignment Allocations Report. And what this is going to display is the resources, total allocation per month, and it's grouped by year. The next report we'll take a look at is the by resource allocation. All right. Now, the main description you'll find here is it's displaying the resources total allocation per month, but it's grouped by resource. The majority of the reports are defined with a similar spreadsheet layout on the top half of the page, and at the bottom you get a graphical chart seeing where those resources are plotted throughout the course of the year. And then the last report here, where is it? Resource availability. And we'll choose 2013 because there's a great example I like to show for that particular year. Okay, so this is going to display the availability of the resource per month based on the difference between the resource capacity and resource allocation. Now, when you have a resource that's over allocated, such as Angela, if you look at July and August, those hours are going to be displayed in red and also as a negative number. Now, the resource capacity per month, well, this is calculated based on the working hours, which is configured in each of the tasks for the project. If we scroll over a little bit further, we can see there are those negative numbers that we're seeing up above for July and August for Angela. So we know right away that she's over allocated that many hours for those 2 months for PM Central. Okay, so with that being said, let's go ahead and get back into the control panel. And we're going to go ahead and take a look at the canned reports. Now, all of the reports are going to be found in this particular section. They are broken out by each of these little sub-tabs here at the top of the page. The way you generate the report is simply by different drop-downs. These drop-down windows will ask you, okay, select the different resources. Some will ask you different projects, time frames, departments. Some will ask you different color codes, etc. Now, I've taken the liberty of running a few of the more popular reports ahead of time, just so we're not wasting time watching me configure reports. Now, the first of those that I'd like to talk about is called the resource. Sorry about that. Let's come back here. There we go. Is the resource timeline report. Now, you'll find on this report it's going to display the tasks, the timeline, the work, and actual work that's been assigned to a resource. Right, the next report we'll take a look at is the resource availability. Now this is going to display the availability, the capacity, and allocation of the selected resources for that period. Now where this one is going to differ than what the resource allocation we saw earlier is that we have several different options. We're not forced over just the current calendar year. We can change this for different time frames, different resources. If we want to do this by year, we can. If we want to do this by individual days, we can change that. So it's really up to you. There's a lot of flexibility in how you run these reports. The next one is the actual cost per month. This is going to display the actual monthly cost for the project. Now, this is based on the resource allocation, the percent complete, and the resources standard rate. And then the last report is going to be called the budget work. This is going to display the comparison between the budget work, project work, and the project actual work. Okay, so now the last feature I'd like to talk about before we end today's session is going to be the alerts. All right, here we go. We'll go back to the control panel and click on the alert setup. I mentioned earlier about the 5 alerts that we've had for a few years, and then the 6th alert that we've added here recently. Now, I just want to point out these alerts are set up and ready to go out of the box, and the best part about these alerts is that they're notifying on an aggregated data across all your project sites. So if you are working on multiple projects, you're automatically going to receive notifications for 5 of the 6 alerts. So the first 5, here again, they have to deal with tasks and issues, and the majority of them revolve around the aspect of if you have a task that's due in so many days, well, you're going to get a reminder about 3 days before it's due. And if it's an overdue item, such as a task or an issue, well, you're going to get a daily reminder until that's complete. Now, the last alert here revolves around the reports, simply a way with handling some of our more enterprise clients where there's larger volumes of projects, larger volumes of items, and simply as you have the larger volumes of data being entered in, generating reports may take a few minutes to compile. So instead of waiting for the system to finish the report and generate the expectation on the page, you can simply just engage the alert, and then as you're working throughout your other daily duties throughout the day, you'll get an alert notification saying that this report has been completed, and I can come back into the system and review that particular report. All right, so with that being said, that's going to conclude the demonstration part of today's webinar. I have a few PowerPoint slides that I'll run through here as we finish up. All right, so here's a summary visual aid that compares the out-of-the-box SharePoint with PM Central in respect to managing key project tasks and collaboration. Now, the default SharePoint project-based site templates, they do provide some good functionality, but they fail to provide a complete project management structure and solution. Now, PM Central, what you've seen today, is going to provide a project management solution, and it covers all the basic project management functionalities, such as task and schedule management, resource and cost management, issues and time and change management. Now, it also capitalizes on SharePoint's collaborative and security features. So in summary, PM Central is a complete, out-of-the-box project management solution. It's delivered on the SharePoint platform. It can be installed and deployed with little or no configuration. It can also be used by individuals who do not have a specialized background in project management. Now, if you'd like to take PM Central for a quick spin, you don't have a test environment readily available, you can evaluate PMC on Bamboo Solutions sandboxes. Now, these sandboxes are set up free of charge. You simply go out to our website at bamboosolutions.com, and you'll find underneath the PM Central logo on the front page the link to sign up for a free sandbox. It maybe takes about 5 minutes to put in your information, and about 10 minutes later you get an email with your new web address for your sandbox and a user ID to log in. So if you're ready to go, start evaluating the solution. Now, we also offer the ability to trial the solution if you wish to download it in your local environment. We also offer other one-hour webinars. These range from anything from workflows to time tracking to also a knowledge management webinar for SharePoint. Bamboo Solutions also offers deployment planning, installation, configuration, and training services, which are designed to make the process of getting started with any of Bamboo's products very simple and easy. Now, if you are interested in even more, Bamboo also offers collections of suites. Now, in this case, we offer a project management suite. The biggest difference between Project Management Suite and PM Central, in respect to what you saw today, is you get 20 additional components with the suite that you don't get with PM Central. And the biggest difference is some of the different tools and features you've seen today are individual web parts that have been cohesively collaborated together to work for a project management purpose. Well, if you want to use, let's say, the calendaring or the alerts elsewhere within your SharePoint environment, let's get away from PM Central project management for a minute. You want to use some of those features for IT purposes. You can use those tools in other aspects of SharePoint, not having anything to do with the project management that we saw today. So that's the biggest difference between the two.